Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and joining us this episode for the first time is Pops. Me and Maul have talked about bringing him in for a while. I know you've gotten a lot of opinions from our text message conversations. Me and Maul both flew with him in our last squadron. Thought it'd be a good time to bring him in. So without further ado, I'll let Pops sort of talk about himself, his biases, love of football, and then, maybe a little bit of sadness for the teams that he's cheered for. But take it away, Pops.
Yeah, man. Thank you a lot, just to you and Maul for being willing to bring me in on this adventure with you guys, and just to talk about football like we used to, sitting there on the faux leather couches there in the squadron when we weren't complaining about the students we were flying with. I just really want to get down to it. I'm hanging out here in Texas with the wife, the kids, the dogs, the cats. Pretty much seems like every animal under the sun. And in my spare time, I'm sitting at texting you guys, talking about what we see with the latest games and everything that's going on in the NFL and college. So let's get into my biases. So my biases, we'll start with college first because it's a little bit shorter. I went to a FCS school. I went to Southern Illinois, which they actually had a pretty good season this year. And fun fact, trivia for you, Kalen DeBoer was actually our OC when I was there. Didn't even know it. Yeah, I didn't even know it at all, but Kalen DeBoer was our OC when I was a student there. My quarterback in high school played for him down there at Southern. Anyways, long story short, so for college football, man, I watch it all. I would say my biases lean more towards the Longhorns. You're already selling horns down forever t-shirts on the website. We're going to have to change that. But, I married into this family. I grew up, I can just think of Vince Young, one of the greatest college football games ever. I think he got robbed of the Heisman. That's a story for another day. But that's where my biases kind of lie. I also loved watching Tebow tear it up at Florida, man. I wish that Swamp Kings would have been a little bit better documentary, but it was still great. But football as a whole, college football, I'll watch it all. I'll cheer for Alabama. I'll boo for Alabama. I'll pull for Georgia. I'm kind of all over the place, just seeing good football and, being able to talk about it with you guys. As far as the pros go, we've already kind of talked to it. You've mentioned me as being a diehard Bears fan, and fortunately I am. I hate to say it, but, I got to grow up watching Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Peanut Tillman, and those were just the guys that I got to see on every Sunday with Rex Grossman fumbling through the offense all the way to the Super Bowl. A little bit of Kyle Orton action in there. Me personally, I'm a big Jay Cutler fan. A lot of people hate him, but if you look at the records, he was the greatest quarterback that the Bears have had. I think it was mostly because of his tenure with the Bears, but dude was a gunslinger. Yes, he put it in places he couldn't, so to speak, but he still, in my opinion, was a great quarterback for the Chicago Bears in comparison to Mitch Trubisky. But we won't go into that, man. I'm excited to see what the Bears are going to get ready to do this offseason, and I hope, along with most of the fan base and all my buddies that I talk to, that it ends up with Fields staying with the Bears. So that's a little bit about me and my biases. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it will be an interesting offseason for the Bears. And I think a lot of, NFL teams, it's definitely one we saw, Black Monday, as a lot of people call it in the NFL. A lot of head coaches have been fired, not just on Monday, but, throughout the season. You've had a lot of cannings. Eberflus looks like he's staying, but Riverboat Ron's out of Washington. Stanley was finally fired. He should have been fired at halftime of that game for the Chargers. I mean, you've had a lot of coaching turnover. Those are just two of the many that we'll see what else shakes out going forward. But, before we get into that, we'll do the favorite thing, past and present first, and we're really going to test out your Bears loyalty. So
let's bring it.
What do you want? You want past or present first?
Let's go with the present.
Present. So take a look at your running back. Khalil Herbert, sort of an undervalued guy, I would say, across the NFL, do I think the Bears can do better? Yeah, I mean, Saquon Barkley's hitting the market this season. We'll see if you guys are able to go out and get him or maybe a Derrick Henry to beef up that running game. But for present day, Khalil Herbert sitting there at running back, where do you go to school?
Yeah, man. Little plug too. I was really upset that we let go of Montgomery and he signed with the Lions. He's having a great year with them. Um, but Khalil Herbert was supposed to be that guy to come in and replace Montgomery, and I mean he's kind of lived up to it. I would say he's not the pound for pound back that Montgomery is, but yeah, he's coming around. But thinking about him, for whatever reason, I want to say, did he go to HBCU?
No, it wasn't HBCU. It was a Power 5 school. I can give you a conference hint if you need it.
Yeah, let's go with that.
All right. Conference was the ACC.
Okay. Man, I don't think he was behind Sam Howell at UNC.
Now, it wasn't a UNC guy.
Definitely wasn't any of the bigger Florida States or Clemson's. What about Tech? Virginia Tech?
It was Virginia Tech. That's a good pull sitting there out of the Hokies. I'd say it's a great pull just because they've really struggled having the talent that sort of me and you grew up, early on in 2000s watching with Michael Vick, Marcus Vick. You think about under the Beamer era or Beamer Senior, as
Mm-hmm.
some of the South Carolina fans may want me to reference. He was an amazing coach. They were competing every year for a national title. It felt like, constantly a top 25 team. But since Beamer left the building, I'd say and even before he left the building, honestly, they've been on a downward trend. It's sad because, you'll see the Ohio State I remember a few years ago, they went to go play in Blacksburg. It's a night game. It was so hyped up. And I think what was that guy's name? Quarterback who hit that, Troy Smith. I think that was the
Yeah.
guy that hit the juke move on that dude that they show like every ESPN season. I mean, it was one of the best plays that you've seen in college. But man, Virginia Tech has struggled just getting guys to come out. But great pull with Khalil. So now we'll go past. So
All right.
past player. I'll tell you this: if you don't get it, you're banned from the show. So, I think that this is a toss up for some people. It may be a little bit tougher, but we'll see. So out of Florida, went to the Bears, then the Texans, the Redskins, the Browns, and the Falcons. Once again, college was Florida. Played for the Bears, Texans, Redskins, Browns, and Falcons. Draft year was 2003. What surprised me about this guy is how high he went. First round, 22nd overall pick. Any other hints that you need?
Yeah, and he was pretty highly touted in college, but he never became that guy that the Bears needed him to be. I'm assuming you're talking Sexy Rexy.
I am talking Sexy Rexy.
Yeah, man. Rex Grossman. Some would probably argue he probably played better for the Redskins than he did for the Bears. I look back on that 2006 season when they went to the Super Bowl. Kyle Orton actually led the team for most of that season. It felt like, and then Rex got healthy again, and he became the starter and led them through the beatdown that Peyton Manning put on to us.
That game was so frustrating sitting back thinking about that, just because I remember having a flip phone. I was sitting in church and I remember my cousin was like, the Bears scored. And I was like, the game has barely kicked off.
Just started.
Like, was it a pass? And they were like, no, there's like 4 seconds off the clock.
Devin
Hester. I was like, is it? Yeah, Devin Hester. I remember sitting there like, what is going on? Like, there ain't no way. And then, you go flip on the TV when you get home. They're like at halftime. They're like, opening kickoff, first time ever in NFL history in the Super Bowl has an opening kickoff of a Super Bowl been returned. I mean, it's just another side plug. I know me and Mom have said this probably a million times. It is a crime against the Hall of Fame. It's a crime against football that Devin Hester isn't in the Hall. I can't sit back. If you were to tell me, I think we'll play this game in a future episode of just like all players in the NFL, you have to build a roster, but you only get to pick that one guy for that one position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going with anyone else other than Devin Hester at kick return.
Oh, for
That's my
sure.
guy.
Yeah.
When you sit back and you challenge anyone, I think the next closest guy, now don't get me wrong, he was amazing, was Dante Hall with
Yeah.
Kansas City, the X Factor.
The old
But
X
I
Factor.
mean, Devin Hester, I remember that game that against the Rams that he took 2 kickoffs back in the game, like literally announced it changed the way that teams played the kickoff. They were
100%.
literally kicking the ball out of bounds to just be like, hey, I'd rather the Bears start from the 45 than give it to Hester, which is also a big shot at Rex Grossman. That's how little like chance that offense had that you like sit back and you go, man, they had probably one of the better defenses of the early 2000s. The only team that I would say was better than them was the Ravens with,
Mm-hmm.
Lewis and Reed and those guys early in 2000 that played the Giants and just beat the brakes off of them in the Super Bowl. But that offense was a struggle bus with
Yeah, and
Rex Grossman.
that's kind of been the story. I mean, you go back and you look at the '85 Bears. It was the defense that led them there. They had the greatest defense in the league at the time, and still contender in some categories. And they just didn't have an offense behind McMahon. I mean, you hand off the ball to Walter Payton, but if you ever found a way to become one-dimensional, thankfully they didn't, and they win the Super Bowl. But that's the thing. That's been the Bears' story. I could argue that, when we got Cutler, our defense started getting old. Like, we had the opportunities with Cutler early on, but Urlacher was on his way out. Briggs was starting to get on his way out. Same with Tillman. So the Bears were never able to piece together. They brought in Brandon Marshall, and I mean, that looked like a duo made in heaven. That was your Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison for the Bears franchise. I will say that. Like, it was a second tier down below those guys, but they made it work until the injuries started happening and, a little bit of Marshall wanting the ball more type attitudes. But, going back to Devin Hester, I mean, this dude would literally be 1 foot from stepping out of bounds in the end zone and take it to the crib. Like, you just don't see guys do that anymore. And, with safety and everything else, guys are just would rather take the it was just a different style of play, man. Like, he was like, I'm taking. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, he was going to take it to the house. Like, that was his mentality. He's like, I'm not going to fair catch this. This is going to the crib.
And one thing about that I noticed, and I'm sure you probably see it as well, I don't see kick returners do it like he did. When he saw daylight, he was full speed, like just full, and he shot the gap. There was like, you can sort of tell that a guy coming out of the end zone, he's running, but then it's like he takes like a half step off just because he's like, I don't want to get murdered. And Hester, it's like when he saw it, he was like, I'm flying, because I think that guys sort of count on a dude just sort of taking a half step and the angles change, and it makes it easier on the defender. But Devin would just go. There was no doubt where he was going, and like you said, it was to the end zone every single time.
I mean, and to continue, it was almost like the cheat code, on Madden, where if you go a little bit to the left, hit a quick juke, you're taking it to the house, Like, that was pretty much what it looked like on any kickoff or punt. But
he was tremendous. Sorry about your Bears losing to the Packers. I mean, there's a lot of questions we're going to get in. Me and Pops were talking about it. Once the NFL season's over, what we plan on doing is doing a complete review of the whole NFL, the 2023 season. We'll break down team by team, really go into we'll allow some of the time to happen to fire coaches, sort of get a little bit more sense of where the coaching staff is, and then we'll take a look at sort of the players, where they can possibly go, draft needs and such, and just a review of 2023, what went wrong, what went right. But we're going to get into that later, because now we got Wildcard football. And now that the national championship's over, this is the only football I got. So this is all that matters. So with that being said,
you're not looking forward to the UFL coming up?
I mean, here's the thing about the UFL. I can get into this. I appreciate it.
I do.
Turpin came out of the USFL at the time, and I will say he played for the Birmingham Stallions. I wouldn't watch the game. That dude earned a right to get a shot with the Cowboys because of how well he played. And I think
Mhm.
that guys will continue to get shots. It's just going to be, I'd argue, less than 5. And
Yeah.
you may have one guy in the whole league that really makes a difference. And it's not because, what do I even want to say, that they're bad players. It's more because most of them have already had an opportunity,
And they
like,
missed it.
and they
Yeah.
missed it. And once that opportunity sort of leaves, it's really difficult to find your way back in it. And if you're not tearing the league up like Turpin did, it's just you're playing against a substandard of the NFL. It's tougher.
Yeah,
So
and for me, the only example besides Turpin that really stands out to me is PJ Walker, hanging out with the Browns right now. Started with Carolina. Matt Rule brought him back out of the league, or brought him back into the NFL from that league, and now he's with the Browns backing up there.
yeah, so I know that the going back to the Bears, not able to beat the Packers get into the playoffs, and talking about wild card games, we'll just go into it right hot and heavy. What game interests you the most of the wild card games that are going to happen this weekend?
Yeah, I think the game that I'm most looking forward to for me would be, uh, man, it's really a toss up, but I think I'm going to go with the Lions versus the Rams. Uh,
I mean,
re-
Stafford's return.
yeah, man, Stafford's return. It's going to be such a huge game. The Rams, they're number 6, uh, coming in against the Lions, and honestly, I think they should be a higher seed, but they had some struggles early on with injuries and whatnot, but they're clicking now. I mean, Williams in the backfield, Stafford, looking ageless like Tom Brady back there. He's always been consistent, always been good, as long as he's been healthy. And I mean, he's got weapons around him with Cup on the outside, as well as Nakua. Props to him for getting the rookie record for receptions and yards. I mean, the kids just they've got the weapons, and on top of it, just coming out of the NFC North, I think the Lions have had their fair share of struggles down the stretch. I will say they put up a really good game against the Cowboys. I would argue, as would a lot of people that aren't Cowboys fans, that they won that game
For
because
sure.
the tackle did report, and it's been evidenced. You know, Dan Campbell came out, was like, I drew the play up for these refs, and they just forgot. And that's what happens. We're all humans. We make mistakes. Unfortunately, this mistake cost the Lions that game. But ever since then, I mean, that was 2 weeks ago. But besides the other games that they've played down the stretch, they've looked pretty suspect. They have flaws to them that makes them beatable. And what I think is going to help the Rams out is the fact that Sean McVay used to coach Jared Goff, and he has the sauce to be able to make Jared Goff's day just a living nightmare.
It doesn't help that one of the Lions' biggest weaknesses this offseason has been their passing defense.
For
Like
sure.
they got torched by the Ravens. They've gotten beat by even the Bears looked
Yeah.
really good. For as bad as the Bears have been all year, the Bears really were 2-0 against them. The first game took a comeback there at the end for the Lions to be able to win. Then the next time the Bears just put it on them. And the Lions have lost to the Packers on Thanksgiving. There's been multiple times that I sit back and I look at the Lions and I want to believe the feel good story. Like
Yeah.
I want to see. I told you and them all this. I think it would be the biggest Super Bowl in NFL history if the Browns played the Lions.
Yeah.
To think that one of these franchises would win a championship, that would be incredible. The issue is that with the Lions, I think that they hit the absolute worst opponent for them to hit opening game of the playoffs. And
100%.
you bring up a great point with, McVay. He knows golf. And now I get that McVay is an offensive guy, but from an offensive guy, he knows what golf's weaknesses are.
Yep.
Like, here's the plays that I couldn't call because golf struggled with them. And that knowledge helps the Rams defense. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not sure how you feel about it, but for me, the Rams still have the greatest defensive tackle to ever play the game in Aaron Donald. Like, that one dude, he takes over games. And I sit back and think about that Lions offensive line is good, but if they can't block him, it's game over. And I would argue, I don't know, what do you think the key is for the Lions on defense against Stafford?
Dude, I think you said it. Um, when we were just chatting a little bit, you said it, and I agree with it. I said that they have to get home, but you took it a step further. Of Aiden Hutchinson is going to have the game of his life to be able to disrupt Matthew Stafford in the passing game, because you got to either stop the run or you got to stop a Hall of Famer from just tearing your secondary apart, because they are suspect. I mean, if you look last Sunday, they let the Vikings run right back into the game with Nick Mullins just being able to
Torch
put
them.
some up to JJ. For touchdowns and
And it wasn't just JJ. It was also Jordan Addison. Like, I get it, if he had thrown 3 touchdown passes to JJ, I sort of sit back and I'm like, hey, that's the number one guy in the NFL right now for being a wide receiver. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Jordan Addison, but like you said, they got burned twice over the top, and against a quarterback that's not Matt Stafford.
For sure.
But do you think that Hutchinson will get home, or do you think that they just double team him all game?
I think it will happen late when guys start getting tired. I think that's when Hutchinson's going to start having success. Now, whether or not it'll be too late for them, that's pretty much on the Rams offense to see if they can capitalize early and get out. Because, I mean, you've said it yourself too, is that the Lions have to get out early to have success in this game. They do not play from behind
well at all. I mean, and that's so surprising to me with Goff. I mean, he came out of Cal, was lighting up teams throwing with the Rams. I mean, the big coming out party for not just the Rams but the Chiefs was that Monday night game that they just went back and forth. I think
for sure.
Each team scored like 50 points that game. It was just, a lot of people say that was probably one of the best Monday night football games of all time. But then you sit back and you think about, the Lions this year against the Ravens, which I get. Ravens are the number 1 seed, but it's a difference in losing to the Ravens where you're like, sort of like Purdy, where you threw 4 picks, you still scored, and the game was like always within striking distance. I know that they lost by 2 scores, but if they had scored a touchdown at any point, in the late 3rd, early 4th, you could see the 49ers get back into it. It was 35-0 against the Ravens, and I just sit back and I'm like, that was a game that they didn't have anything, and that scares me. I think Gibbs has played a lot better than he's the running back that they drafted, the way he's playing right now. It will be interesting because I think that I sort of go to this idea of what happened last night in the Natty, and we'll get into that in our college episode, but the Lions, I get that they're not playing Michigan's defense. They're not playing the best defense in the world. Can they get on the perimeter? Can they take away Aaron Donald, get Gibbs on the outside, get Amon-Ra St. Brown involved? Can Jamison Williams finally be worth that first-round pick that the Lions used on him when he came out of Alabama? Those are my big questions. But, those are mainly the questions. What do you sort of see as what actually happens in the game?
I think they're going to have a hard time. I think the Rams are going to be able to shut down Montgomery, because I've already alluded to, he's a pound for pound guy. He's going right up the middle. So yeah, Gibbs is going to have to step up. Williams, excuse me. He's going to have to keep off ESPN Bet, and show up to the game, ready to go. But yeah, you're right. He has not played to the caliber that they expected him to when they drafted him. He was one of your boys at Bama, right?
Yeah, I mean, he came out of Ohio State, went to Bama for that year. He's been a incredible deep ball guy when he was with Bryce Young. However, with the Lions, I mean, he's hit some home runs. There was one time they sent him on a jet sweep, took it to the house. But I've
Mhm.
also seen him running down the field and drop some really, what I would argue, the terms a contested catch where you've got, and he's not good at those. Like the Des Bryant's that it was like 50-50 balls that dude won. Jameson Williams is like batting less than 10%. Like he's not that guy that it's like when I need a guy to go get it in between two guys, that's the guy that's going to come down with it. He's the guy that's like, if I can just, punt this ball up in the air to him wide open, that's my guy. But he's not that type of physical receiver. Julio, Calvin Johnson,
Mike
Larry
Evans.
Fitzgerald, Mike Evans. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not that guy. And so you got the Rams winning.
Yeah, I can see the Rams taking this game just because down the stretch, like I said, the Lions just were not playing good outside of the Cowboys game, and yeah, I would see. I think the Rams are probably. I'd say probably be close, but I'd say the Rams probably win by a touchdown.
Yeah, if the Rams win, I think they get up early. Like what you talked about. Like I can see them first half 17-3. If the Rams are going to win, that's sort of how I see it going. That they're able to get up early. They just sort of frustrate Goff. He's not able to throw a bunch. I think I can see the Lions. If the Lions lose, they score less than 2 touchdowns. Like it's just not the Lions' day. If the Lions win, for me, it's I sort of think it's almost the opposite. I think it's sort of a blowout. Like I can see the Lions putting up 35 to 40 points and really just running away with it. Big plays, getting ahead, making it so Aiden Hutchinson can just run.
Yeah.
That helps them where they are like, hey, it's a sack the quarterback game, because sort of like last night's game with Michigan, that Washington just got behind the chains. Penix was missing throws, which that's the difficult part. You sort of sit back and look at the two quarterbacks. Who am I going to bet on to miss throws? Goff. Like, that's the difference. Like, you're never going to convince me to put money on Matt Stafford to have a bad game. So,
for sure.
I got the Rams as well. So, do you want to stick in the NFC or you want to go AFC?
Man, let's just keep going with the NFC.
All right. So, I saw this clip. I was sort of hoping you'd say this. I saw this clip and it made me laugh. It's this guy who's dressed up in Cowboys gear, and they're like, hey, playoffs are set. Who do you think you got? He's like, man, I'm excited. We got the Rams. He's like, I know they're a good team. They're a prior Super Bowl team, but I think we can get them in Dallas. And he's like, no, you didn't get the Rams. He goes, oh, we got the Eagles. We've already beat them at home. This is gonna be great. And like, you didn't get the Eagles. And he's like, who we get? He's like, you played them before. And he's like, but who? And he's like, Green. And he's like, don't you say it. And they're like, Green Bay. And he's like, oh, history. That to me is this game, because on paper, the Cowboys, in my opinion, should blow the Packers out of the water.
Oh, 100%.
Too many games this year for the Packers has Jordan Love looked too inconsistent. Now, he'll throw some passes. I mean, he did against the Bears that I sort of sit back and I'm like, hey, great throw. And then there's other games that I'm like, man, Jordan Love's he's showing it that it's a first-year guy playing every game. Dallas, on the other hand, you just sort of sit back and think about the last 25 years of them playing in the playoffs. They've had some struggles. I mean, what do you see with Dallas and how they win?
Yeah, man. So this takes me back to, probably college, a little bit of high school, where Tony Romo was teeing off or matching up with Aaron Rodgers. And, it seemed like every year in the playoffs here, which takes me back, last time they played, I would argue that Des Bryant did make that catch, but that's just because I hate the Packers.
So does every Cowboys fan.
Yeah, well, I hate the Packers too, so you're welcome, Cowboys fans. But what I see here, man, is the Packers defense has their work cut out for them. because Dak's going to sling the ball. I mean, he has been playing exceptionally well. I think the scrutiny that he's got the past couple of years has been blurred out this year. Somehow he's been able to deal with it. We were talking off script, just how little Dak has been turning the ball over this year is really playing a factor because that was his biggest downfall. We knew he could throw the ball, but it's a matter of who he was throwing it to or what throws he was making. And this year, he's making the throws he has to make. And CD Lamb is leading the league in almost every category imaginable as a wide receiver. And guess what? When you start doubling CD, he's got Ferguson right there too. He loves going to Ferguson, and when that stops, they've got a running back out of Tony Pollard if they can get that run game going as well. So I think the Packers have their work cut out for them. And I could see this being a big game for Dallas, and especially not to mention they're playing in Jerry World. They're undefeated. I don't see this game being the game that ends that streak.
The question I have for the Cowboys is, at some point in the playoffs, they're going to have to run the football to win.
Yes.
And where does that game happen? Because eventually, the way to beat the Cowboys, in my opinion, is you got to take away CD Lamb, which I get. It's not an impossible task, but it's a very difficult one. There's very few corners, especially in the league, that you touch the receiver after 2 yards, you pull him, you pass it. Everything is designed to work against you as a cornerback in the league. However, the games that the Cowboys have lost, even CD still made plays, but they really forced the Cowboys to just say, hey, you really got to run. And if you can't run against us, you're going to struggle. Tony Pollard, he's played a lot better than Zeke, but regaining the form that he had when Zeke was there, I have not seen that same Tony Pollard on the field.
100%. Yeah, no, I haven't either. I mean, look at last year. He was leading most categories in fantasy. But he doesn't have the same run style that Zeke had, and I don't think he's as feared as Zeke was early on in his career. We kind of saw Tony Pollard, his play, his explosiveness, kind of step Zeke out, and Jerry's like, "Hey, I'm not going to pay Zeke because we got this guy here." And now he's in the RB1 shoes, and he's just not filling them to the potential that I think we all thought he had. Not saying he's not good, because he's still getting 50-plus yards a game, but it's just not the level I think we all expected. As far as your question about them having to run the ball to win, man, I think it really depends who gets to play San Fran. Because if Dallas wins this game, they're going to be able to pick up either Detroit or, hey, whoever wins that Philly-Tampa game, will be who they play next. Because obviously San Fran's going to take the lowest seed out of that. So I think it would come down to the NFC Championship game, in my honest opinion right now, for them to have to run the ball to win the game as well.
Running to win, we'll get into the future projections. That is the opposite side of the ball for the Packers. If the Packers want this game, it's Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. It's making it so that you're not putting Love into a position that it's 3rd and long. You're not letting Lawrence and Micah Parsons just pin their ears back and go. You've got to make it to where you're having manageable days. And if they can run, Dallas has shown the susceptibility to give up plays in the running game, which is sort of crazy when you sit back and you're like, oh, they have Micah Parsons. They don't have a defensive tackle. They don't have that dude. They don't have an Aaron Donald. They don't have a Chris Jones that's taken a center and a guard and making it so their linebackers can run free. It's really, when you think about it, I haven't really heard Kyle Vander Esch name. I think that's Vander Esch.
Vander Esch
named much of the season. Mm-hmm. And it's because they don't have that guy in the center that's hogging up guys. For me, that's how the Packers, they got to run. And then the biggest thing with the Packers in how they'll lose the game so quick. Love turning the ball over. He's got
Yes.
to play good.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they their game plan against Deron Bland out there, because that man's had quite the season. I'm just waiting for him to be on a disguise, and he just pops up and snags that ball and takes it to the crib off of Jordan Love.
Bland's had more picks, but he's given up some deep shots.
Fair, that's fair. But I will say in that regard, this is Love's first time in the playoffs. Getting to get this experience, I think it's going to be more of a head game for him. I know I've sent the stat to you guys. He's only thrown one pick in like the last 6 games. I want to say, to the tune of like 13 touchdowns. So I mean, he's playing really, really decent right now compared to how inconsistent he was. But it was just earlier in the month of December, they lost to the Giants. The next week after, they get torched by the Buccaneers. So the Packers have showed that they're beatable. And it really depends on how well Jordan Love's going to be able to hold on to the football and just take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, if they can't take care of the football, it's over. You can't go. My dad always talks about this. You can't go into an opponent's stadium and turn the ball over and have a bad 100%. Game.
Yep.
You've got to play an A game to get there, and that's what the Packers are going to have to play. That being said, I want to say that the game's close just because it's the Cowboys, but at the same time, I really do think the Cowboys sort of beat the brakes off the Packers. I don't get this sense from the Packers that they're going to put up a great fight against the Cowboys. I really think that Dak has a good game, 4 or 5 touchdown passes. I don't get this sense that the Packers defense is capable of shutting them down. So that's where I'm going. I'm going Dallas. What do you got?
Yeah, I think just because I hate the Packers, I'm gonna go with Dallas plus 10. I think it's going to be over 10 points for Dallas in my own made up spread there. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, let me take a look at the spread real quick. I mean, sitting back thinking, I'd say Dallas. I haven't even looked at it. I'd say they're probably a 5.5 point spread right off the bat, just because that's sort of what my gut's telling me. But for the wild card, they are, as I pull it up on ESPN, Dallas is a 7.5 point favorite. And usually a home team's getting 3.
Yep.
Just because. So they're really sitting about a 4.5. They're getting a 3-point swing for being home. The Lions-Rams game, what do you think the spread is?
2.5. I think it's probably for the Rams.
No. Okay. It's Detroit by 3, which being a 3-point home swing, they're saying it's an even game. Vegas is saying it's even. So I sit back and that makes sense. Let's see. Let's look at the AFC. All right, well, here's a good one. The closest AFC spread is the Browns-Texans, which is sort of nuts because the Texans, I think, are a good football team. I equate them to what Jacksonville was last year.
Yes.
I think that they can shock a team, sort of like they did the Chargers. Do I think that they can go up and beat a really good team? No. The good thing for the Texans is that only really good team is the Ravens. Like the rest of the AFC, I would argue that they'll probably have a harder test playing the Browns than they would the Chiefs. I know that's crazy to say, but that's sort of where I'm sitting. It's a 2.5 point spread right now for Cleveland. You sit back and look at this game. What's sort of striking you right off the get-go between the Browns and the Texans?
Man, for me, it's the argument that Joe Flacco's making for the comeback player of the year. Only playing 6 games. I think to me, I heard it yesterday. I want to say he's averaging 320 yards in the air per game right now. I mean, that's unreal. And not to mention, they're still able to put the ball on the ground with Jerome Ford and make moves there. in my opinion, I'm putting them above the Texans, just because they're well rounded. They've got a defense. Myles Garrett is going to make C.J. Stroud's life uh, another nightmare, and it's going to be tough for C.J. for the fact that it's his first time as a rookie being in the playoffs. D'Amico's done fantastic with that team. However, they have a problem getting the run going, and I don't think they have enough weapons in the pass game like they did earlier in the season. With Tank Dell going down, only having Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz out there, it's going to be tough if the Texans are unable to run the ball against the Browns, which I think is going to be what it is, because they had a hard time running against the Colts just this past weekend.
It's one of those games that you can't let one guy for the Texans take over, and that one guy is Myles Garrett. Like, if you let him control, the passing game of the Texans, it's over. Regardless of how good the Texans defense plays, this is sort of it's setting up, in my opinion, for the Texans to really be in this game. Last time they played the Browns, they gave up like 260 yards.
Well,
I think
dude,
it was to Amari Cooper.
Well, and they just gave up 190 yards to JT this past weekend on the ground.
Yeah, on the ground. The
Yeah,
Texans have gotten burned. Yeah. They have for sure. There's been good games for the Texans. There's been really bad games for the Texans. I sit back and look at it and I go, CJ Stroud helps them more than Case Keenum does, but from the standpoint of where do I see this game going, I like the Browns too much. And the other thing that I really like, I know that Flacco is sort of this mixed bag of what are you going to get, but at the same time, the dude's won a Super Bowl. He has plenty of playoff experience. And honestly, this may be, I'm sitting back trying to think of, outside of Torrey Smith, has he really had anyone better than Amari Cooper to throw the football to? Like,
that's a good point.
The Ravens were never stacked with that year that they won the Super Bowl. I know they had Jacoby Jones, who played really well that year, but they've never had a true bona fide, like, hey, first round pick, been excellent every year type of wide receiver.
Was Steve Smith with Joe Flacco, or was that Lamar when Steve was with the Ravens?
I think Steve played with the Ravens. I don't know if he was a part of that Super Bowl that they won. I can take a look real quick because that's a great question with them. But outside of the Jacoby Jones, I think it was still a Ray Rice team, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But that team won because it was Ray Lewis's last year. Like
100%.
Once they got through Denver and made that miracle happen, they weren't going to lose that game. Let's take a look.
While you looked at it,
he did not win the Super Bowl with them.
Okay.
He came on after that Super Bowl. He was there 2014 through 2016 with the Steelers, with the Ravens. So that's it with Steve Smith and that team. I can take a look at the Super Bowl, but I just sort of sit back with the Browns. Give me Flacco, give me Myles Garrett to get it done in Cleveland. The first step of them trying to shock the world is underway, and it's a down year in the AFC. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm taking the Browns. Honestly, as good as the defense of the Browns is, as long as we get an average resemblance of Joe Flacco, they're going to go deep. There's too much liability in the AFC right now that it's really wide open for who's number 2 getting ready to play the Ravens. I think that's what we're going to end up seeing. And we can get into it more here in a little bit. But I've got the Browns winning this game. They're going to go into NRG, beat the Texans, and move on to the next week.
And the other receiver I forgot, he was really good. I think he's a Hall of Fame guy, Anquan Bolden. That's the other guy. It was Jacoby Jones, Torrey Smith, and Anquan Bolden were the receivers on that Super Bowl team. Really, really good receivers. None of them to the level I would argue. I still think Cooper's probably the better one out of all those guys. But Cooper and Anquan, to me, are the same player. Like, that's who they are. Really good players. But interesting take on that. We'll go stick in the AFC since we're talking about sort of how they're below average. And speaking of a team that's not performing consistently.
Oh, the Bills.
Well, I was going to say, you can take your pick. It's either the Chiefs or the Dolphins, because neither one, it's like the Dolphins know how to score 70 points, and then they can't get it done against the Bills. And then you got a Chiefs team that 2 weeks ago looked awful against the Raiders. Awful. At home. At home. You know, the Raiders were up by 14 points at the Death Star and gave it up. And the Chiefs came back and found a way, and then in Arrowhead lose. And the Chiefs this year, I would argue, have never looked more vulnerable in, since in the Mahomes era. And my dad, he said something last night. It was funny hearing my dad say this. He doesn't use this word often, but he goes, they were lacking swag. Like, he's like, you see guys throw their helmets on the sideline, and you can just tell, like, from the energy there, that something's missing. I would argue that the biggest thing they're missing is a wide receiver with hands that can catch the football. I mean, it's difficult because I want to pick against the Chiefs in this game. But at the same time, I also understand it's probably going to be about -2. And even though Tua's got Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, I just don't know what are your keys that you're seeing for both sides.
Yeah, man. If we're going to stick with the Chiefs, talking about them, I think it's really showing how much they miss Eric being an enemy. When he left, departed the fix, he was their guy. He was their offensive guru that everybody thought Matt Nagy was. And, now I get my plug on how much disdain I have for Matt Nagy. I've been sending you guys memes all year of Matt Nagy overlooking Pat Mahomes, of how he's going to ruin a couple years of his career. And it's becoming true. I mean, you have the greatest quarterback. Everybody's like, what if he had a different quarterback besides Trubisky? What would happen? Well, we're seeing it right now. He has the greatest quarterback. And I don't know how much talk goes between him and Andy and who's actually making the final say on the play calls. But it doesn't help that you're the OC with the greatest quarterback and you can't score touchdowns. It came back to, you mentioned it, the lack of depth they had playing the Chargers this last week. I know everybody's sitting on the bench, but they still couldn't even score a touchdown. I mean, Nagy's calling the plays, and you can't score a touchdown with the backups. And, it's tough because I think a lot of the frustration, your dad mentioned the lack of swagger on the bench. I think that comes from the pressure, man. Look at these guys. They've been AFC, the last 6 seasons, the championship game, whether they made it beyond or not. They went to the won Super Bowl twice, lost once, to Tom Brady. And man, like, there's just so much pressure that's just hanging over them. They finally have that dynasty tag to their franchise, and you can see it. I mean, I don't know if it's immaturity of the players or just the pressure is crumbling them, but I think we're going to see disappointment. And honestly, I know we talked about it. I think the Dolphins are going to beat them handedly. I'm saying 2 touchdowns.
Oh, so you got the Dolphins winning?
Yeah, I got the Dolphins winning by 2 touchdowns. I mean, if you're struggling with the Raiders, Lord forbid you actually play an offense who can move the ball. Tyreek coming back, he's going to be hungry for the ball. I just see it moving that direction. And that's where we're going. I mean, I can dive into the Dolphins and what I see there, but that's just my prediction. The Chiefs are going to get bounced this first round.
Yeah, I mean, if you're right, that's an incredible pull, especially if the Dolphins win by more than 14. It's not that it's not outside of the realm of possibilities. It's more that when I sit back and I look at it, I just want to know from the Dolphins' standpoint of time and time again, and I know this has been said by every analyst out there, Tua's got to show up.
Yes.
Like, that's it. Like, Tua has to be the one to make those throws. You can't sit back and say that you've got Raheem Mostert, you got Jalen Waddle, you got Tyreek Hill, you got McDaniels calling plays, who's an offensive guru. You're sporting his glasses today. I mean, you're sitting back and you look at the team and what they're capable of. And I mean, it wasn't, you sit back and think about the first, I'd say, third of the year. I'd argue people were saying it's the Dolphins to lose. Like, they were, I think, for a lot of people, the best team in all of pro football. Then they lose to the Bills. I mean, you sit back and they had 5 weeks to go with a 3-game lead in the division, and they
And
blew
lost
it.
it.
And they
Yeah.
blew it. And that to me is just like, even against the Bills, like, they just struggled. And the Bills they're missing a starting corner, they're missing a starting linebacker. It seemed like every other play, somebody on the Bills or the Dolphins. And that's the other big kill for the Dolphins. It's like, regardless of how good their offense may be, losing Chubb, losing Phillips, losing these guys on defense kills them. And
Yep.
Can they get through the Chiefs? Yeah. They're going to get through the Ravens?
No.
Absolutely not. Like, they just don't have that ability. The thing that gives me hope for the Dolphins is this. We talked about that Chiefs game they lost to the Raiders. And I sent you guys a stat. And it's still, to me, that's not even a college stat. That's a high school stat. That the
Not
starting
completing a-
quarterback does not complete a pass in the second, third, or fourth quarter, and you won the game.
Yep.
You won the game. And it was close. Close. I mean, it wasn't like the Raiders blew them out of the water. Like, I can understand if you're like, well, in the first quarter, they scored 70 points, and then they ran the ball for the rest of the game. That's not it. Like, Aiden he's not the quarterback of the future for the Raiders. But you sit back and you look at Tua in that offense, you have to believe that the Dolphins can put up 20 to 30 points on the Chiefs.
Yep.
I mean, and from the Dolphins' perspective, it's just a matter of, can you shut down Travis
Chris
Kelce?
Jones. Oh, yeah.
Like, on offense, the thing I can see the Chiefs doing, which I'm surprised they haven't done more of, getting Jerick McKinnon in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Tony can't catch, then get the ball out, do a lot of misdirection, a lot of just jet sweeps, stuff that Mahomes is able to use his backs more. I know that Pacheco is more of a runner. I did see probably one of the funniest memes I've ever seen when he took off on that run down the sideline a few weeks ago. It was like, this is every kid in a Payless shoe store when you're like, hey, test these shoes out. Like, it was one of the funniest. He just runs like he's trying to, like, push his foot 2 feet into the ground.
Yeah.
But the issue is it's still Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to go with the Chiefs just because I know what the Chiefs are capable of. I've seen them do it. I've never seen the Dolphins really show what they're capable of. That's why I got to go with the Chiefs. But you got the Dolphins by 2 scores.
Yeah, and I can see that way. The Chiefs have had some time off, and hopefully something is clicked within them. Because I mean, it's kind of one of those things you want to see it for the sake of the NFL history. For them to have this terrible season, for them to, and it's funny they have a winning record, but we say they had a terrible season. For them to bounce back here in the playoffs. Do I see them making the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. But if they do make it past the Dolphins, then, kudos to them, and I'll be happy to eat my pie. But the things that I see, the Dolphins, they struggled last year down the stretch as they're doing right now. I don't see how they will struggle against the Chiefs. You brought up weather. Weather's always going to be a good topic. I feel like as long as Tua can throw it 40 yards, he's going to have Tyreek, who played there, to be able to catch those deep shots. But again, Andy Reid
I
knows
don't even
Tyreek.
think you
So
have to get Tyreek in a deep shot.
yeah,
You just have to let him have space. Like
exactly.
that dude, he beats angles that you sit back and you're like, there's no way the defensive back should not be able to tackle this dude. And he just gets the edge. There's no one that gets the boundary better than Tyreek Hill. I've never seen it in all of pro football. I've never seen a guy that makes guys look slow as he does.
Well, and too, you think about it too. You go back from a fundamental standpoint. Who catches the ball and then jumps back immediately? I mean, the fact that my man does that, he goes -2 yards and then starts dancing. I mean, it's remarkable what that man can do with his agility and his quickness.
So, I mean, that we got two more games sitting back, not to fast forward and get away from the Chiefs Dolphins, but of the two games left, we'll go with the one that has the bigger spread. Right now, that is the Buffalo Bills are -10 over the Steelers. I agree with that from the standpoint because that Saturday game of the Steelers and Ravens, I just sit back and I'm like, for as much talent as Baltimore had on the bench, the Steelers could not have looked worse with their starters. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know it was a rainy game. You can make those excuses all day long. The Steelers looked horrific on offense. And if it wasn't for a 75-yard touchdown pass, I don't think the Steelers won the game.
For
It
sure.
was a field position game that I think eventually the Steelers were going to lose. But man, the only thing that gives the Steelers hope is the Bills' inability to play above the talent that they're playing. But, before I get into my prediction, what do you got in terms of Bills Steelers?
Yeah, man. I think we already can see it. It's a matter of how how Josh Allen's going to play. Like I've never seen. I think you're the one who says it, but you've never seen a team that boils down to one person's performance more so than the Bills. I mean, if Josh Allen has a terrible game, they're going to have a terrible game. That's just the way that it's been since he's been drafted by the Bills. Uh, whether that's a fault on him or a fault on the coaches around him, that's just what we see with him. Now, I will say against the Steelers, man, if he doesn't come out and play lights out, I would be honestly surprised. I mean, TJ Watt's injured. We're thinking he's probably going to be doubtful for this game, which, the grit that man has coming from that lineage of family, if he can play, he's going to play, but he's not going to be 100%. So the fact is, Allen's going to have time to sit back there, and I think he's going to have his way with them, and obviously so does Vegas, based on what we're seeing. I haven't looked at it. Foul on me. I'm curious if Gabe Davis is going to be back or not moving into this game, or if they're going to rest him. But yeah, you've got James Cook in the background, hopefully, or in the backfield. Hopefully, he can catch a wide open touchdown and doesn't pull a Tony. But they've got the weapons to beat the Steelers. As far as the Steelers go, I was listening to the McAfee show earlier, and for once, I kind of agreed with Stephen A. But they were talking about the ability of Mike Tomlin to have such success, to be the winning coach that he is. But let's be honest, do you want to be the middle of the road team every single year? Where, yes, we make the playoffs, but that's it. That's our ceiling. Do you want to be stuck in the middle of the road? Or would you rather be down at the bottom, rebuilding to the top, or at the top, trying to get knocked off versus being comfortable right in the middle? And that's what the Steelers have been. The Steelers, ever since Roethlisberger, they had a good season in 2020, but they haven't made it past the wild card since 2016. And there's a lot of questions. I don't think they'll move on from Mike Tomlin, but this is going to be a factor, I think, in his contract that's due to expire in 2024. And that offense, like you've said, it's abysmal. I mean, they couldn't even get 300 yards worth of offense in the game. So I'll turn on over to you, but I think the Bills are going to win this one handedly, just like Vegas thinks.
I The Steelers thing to me, it comes down to one thing. It's not Tomlin, it's Kenny Pickett. Like
Yeah,
Joe Flacco threw more, or he's thrown the same amount of touchdown passes in Kenny Pickett's career
for sure.
in the month of December. Like the position of quarterback for the Steelers has really been their downfall this year. And the Steelers also, I know that it's been made or referenced by Big Ben and other guys that they're not living up to this like Steelers way.
Culture.
And
Yeah.
it's because they don't, on the defensive line, they have TJ Watt and that's it. Like they
Yep.
don't have that linebacker core and really that interior defensive line that they've had in the past. I know that they have Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward, I would argue, is, not a bad player, but he's not the player that he was a few years ago. It's just they have the inability to really force pressure from the interior of the defensive line without blitzing. And that's it. Anytime you're having a blitz, you're just leaving corners more one-on-one, and
On
that
an
doesn't
island.
work out for anybody in the NFL.
For sure.
I sit back and look at Josh Allen. My favorite player growing up, watched him all the time, was Brett Favre. That dude is the embodiment of Brett Favre, especially when you take a look at what you said at the beginning. Like his performance dictates the win-loss column. That was Brett Favre. Like there was never. I still remember there was a game in the playoffs against the Rams that Favre threw 6 interceptions in one game, in a playoff game.
Yeah.
I mean, they got demolished by the Rams that game. You turn the ball over 6 times, that's going to happen. Allen's willing to give it deep to Diggs and Davis. Davis, they're saying I looked it up, PCL strain. He's questionable, but they think he has a good chance at playing in the game. I think he really needs to. The thing that really I liked about the Bills is that the guys who came in were not that deep route. They were more that, over the intermediate route runners, the Cole Beasleys that the Bills have typically had. That to me is what the Bills really need to get to. Like I know that they love taking their deep shots, but them being underneath route runners, getting Allen just some guys to check it down to, that's where the Bills beat the Steelers. Like I don't think it's close just because the Steelers have looked well below average this year. The fact that they're a playoff team, I would argue, is sort of shocking. And it's really because they won so many games up front in the season. I don't see a scenario without Josh Allen turning it over 3 to 4 times that the Steelers win this game. But that's my pick.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even you go into the last game, he threw 2 silly picks early on in the game. One was on that 4th down where he just throws it up and on a hope and a prayer, and it got picked off. Looked like it was going to nobody. That's just been his MO. That's the way he plays. And I think as far as Josh Allen goes, I would take that risk versus the reward every single game. Because, yeah, as a defense, you're watching this guy just be reckless with the ball. But the times that it pays off, I mean, it's unreal. The raw talent that Josh Allen has, and that's why I believe, yeah, just like you said, they would have to turn the ball over so much. I mean, he turned it over twice via pick. Did he have a fumble too? I thought he might have had a fumble, against the Dolphins, and they still win.
The good thing about Josh Allen when he's not throwing, I love the fact that Josh Allen, when he runs, he's going to get the first down. Like,
True.
That dude knows exactly. You don't see him run out of bounds. You don't see him slide. Now, I think that's going to come at the detriment of Josh Allen's health as his career continues. But when it comes time for the playoffs, like in the game, like it's win or go home. Like those are the type of plays that like drive me crazy. Is you either win this game or you leave, and you'll see a guy start his slide before the first down marker, and you're like, dude, Go get it. This
Yep.
this is the game now that I need you to go get it. The good thing for the Bills is Josh Allen will do that in a preseason game. So, you know, now that it's playoff time, it's just like, yeah, we're gonna go get this thing. I just it's his game to win. And for me, it's not just his game to win. I have this like I know some people have sort of started to predict that the Bills have a real good chance to surprise some teams.
100%.
Like, I think that if they play the Chiefs again, they beat them. If they play
Yep.
the Dolphins again, they beat them. You know, and then you look at the other AFC matchup of Browns Texans. Either one of those teams, the Dolphins can, or excuse me, the Bills can beat. It's a matter of can the Bills get through the Ravens? That's going to be the question. Who can get through the Ravens to win it all? I'd give the Bills probably the best chance of the AFC teams there, outside of the Browns. The Browns,
Yeah.
the reason I give them the edge, A, Flacco revenge game, and then B, they know the Ravens. Like it's just a tough divisional game. They hate one another. That and if the Browns get to meet up with them, especially in like an AFC championship game scenario, it's going to be tough not to pick the Browns. So tough game, but you and me both got the Bills. And then this is the one that I think when I sit back, it may not be the best game, but to me it's the most interesting because I don't know who to pick, is the Eagles and Bucks. Like,
Yeah.
which is nuts. It's nuts saying that after the Eagles were 10-1. Like, if you would have sat back and been like, hey, the Eagles, wildcard team, you'd been like, what? What do you mean? They were 10-1. Yeah.
Yep.
They lost the division to the Cowboys. You'd have been like, oh, they're playing on the road against the Buccaneers. You're like, what happened? You know, if you were to go into a coma after week 11, you just sort of sit back and this Eagles team has struggled in against really bad. You look at the Cardinals, the Giants.
The Giants, yeah.
I mean, this is a team that's Tyrod Taylor, and that's not. It's not that that's a bad thing. It's more just like that's not these guys that you're gonna have to play in the playoffs. Tyrod Taylor doesn't start on the Cowboys. He doesn't start on the Niners. Like he doesn't start with I'd argue he doesn't start for any of the playoff teams.
Mhm.
Like he's not supposed to be better than what you're letting him be on the field. A lot of that for me comes up. I've said it all year. The Eagles' defensive line has looked horrific. They cannot get it figured out. I just sit back and I struggle picking a winner. Where are you looking at in terms of Eagles, Bucks?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll add on to the dialogue here with the whole Eagles struggle. I mean, they've completely fallen off the face of the earth. You know, the last 5 out of the 6 games, dropping them, and you know, this past weekend going into the playoffs, it doesn't help that AJ Brown got hurt, as well as Jalen Hurts dislocating his finger. On his throwing hand. Not sure if you saw that, but it looked like the
Yeah, it was ugly.
predictability chart. It looked like the predictability chart on ESPN of who was going to win the game. So they've got questions on offense, if they're going to be 100% or not, as well as the defense. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, Sirianni's on TV saying, "Hey, we need a spark." So I let Desai go, and Matt Patricia is going to be calling the plays now. But ever since that's happened, there hasn't been a huge change, and what seems to have been changed by Matt Patricia is nothing but confusion. I mean, they've been drawing it up on TV. You can even watch a game as just a normal guy. You'll see guys running in motion, and there's no communication from the defense, and the guy in motion ends up with the ball, getting positive yards, and you're just like, man, that's a misassignment right there. And just the crossover transfer from Desai to Patricia, it just hasn't smoothed itself out. So their defense is a liability. And I think Baker has enough experience that he's going to be able to expose a little bit of those issues. Now, where do I see the game going? I think the Eagles just have too much raw talent on offense to lose this game. But do I see it being a huge game? No, I think it's a 3-point or less field goal at the last second type of game. That's where I see this game going. Because it also falls back. Yes, Baker has the experience, but which Baker is going to show up? We've seen plenty of times where Baker comes out and he just looks mid, man. Like I put him at like slightly above average if I had to write him a grade sheet. Um, there's some things he does really well, but there's other things where he just shows up and he just looks clueless. And uh, I think that's going to play into this game. The good news is that they're playing in Tampa Bay, but I don't think that's enough for Baker Mayfield to overcome uh, the Eagles. And I think that the Eagles end up winning this game.
I see it being close too. I see this game going exactly how the Eagles games have gone here recently. That the Eagles get up in the first quarter, let's call it 17-3, more than a touchdown. But throughout the game, the Bucks just keep
Chip away.
keep coming back. I think at the end of the game, there's going to be a chance for Baker to win it.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is where I honestly, I'd love to see Baker do it. I'd love to see him get the redemption. He's played, I would argue, better than people thought he would in Tampa Bay.
100%.
I think he's earned the right to come back as a starter next year with Tampa Bay. He'll need Mike Evans. Mike Evans is he's a true number one receiver in the NFL. He needs that guy. I just sort of sit back. I'm going to pick the Eagles, but it would not shock me to see Baker Mayfield late in the fourth quarter take apart a defense that has shown time and time again they can't be trusted down the stretch.
For sure.
So it's tough, but I'm in that same boat with you. I look at the Eagles roster and I just have a hard time not going, yeah, this is the roster that's going to win it. It's tough, but we've sort of been, for most of the games, we've been on the same sheet of music. We'll see who actually gets to come out and get ahead. I know we've been sitting here for a little over an hour. Your first episode, getting it knocked out. It's went well.
Man.
Sitting back, all the uploads have happened. So before I let anybody go, you got anything else that you want to pile on before we cut off episode 1 of Pomps, episode 35 overall with FTS?
Yeah, man. What do you see happening if the Eagles lose this game with Sirianni?
If the Eagles lose, they fire Sirianni. The Eagles have this history. They did it with Doug Peterson. Win a Super Bowl, have a really bad year, have some questions at quarterback, fire him, go a different direction. And the thing with Sirianni that I don't like, and I know that this is an outsider looking in, but this is just what I see. When Bill Belichick has a problem with the defense, Bill Belichick's grabbing the clipboard. When Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan's having a problem with the offense, they're grabbing the clipboard. They have the call sheet. They are a specialist in one particular area. Whether it's offense or defense, they have something that when it's not going right, them as a head coach gets it fixed. I have not seen that from Sirianni. I couldn't tell you what his specialty is. Is it offense or is it defense? Couldn't tell you. He seems to embody the Philadelphia spirit on the sideline, just, giving guys the finger, he throwing snowballs at Santa. That's who Sirianni strikes me as, but he doesn't strike me as this guy. And it's been proven this year that the Eagles continue to have problems, but no one in the organization who's supposed to do it as the head coach has stepped up to resolve those issues. I just don't see it. I know we had talked about this. My gut feeling is if the Eagles were to let go of Sirianni, it's because Bill Belichick's on the table.
Yeah.
And Belichick, to me, fits in the system really well because of one guy, and it's Jalen Hurts. And you sit back and you go, why do you say that? It is because when you look at his relationship with Tom Brady, it was not, I would argue, a friendship. it was definitely a coach and a player. But Belichick was able to be very successful with Tom because Tom came from like this uber disciplined role.
Mhm.
Tom Brady didn't eat strawberries because he thought that they would affect his performance.
Yeah.
When you take a look at like the coachability of an athlete, Belichick had to love Tom Brady. You know, that was the guy that he could scream at in practice, but he knew that he could treat him in a certain way because guys were going to look at that and say, I need to get my act together. And then Tom was also a Belichick of his own right. Like he would
Mhm.
sit back and look at tight. If you're not in the right position, you're going to learn it. We're going to stay after. Gronk talked about it, that Brady, after practice was over, would have guys stay after to catch the football. Jalen Hurts played for Nick Saban. Saban and Belichick are cut from the same cloth.
Yep.
Saban was Belichick's DC with the Browns
And with the
before
Browns. Yeah.
they, closed that franchise for a short few years. That makes sense to me. Does it happen? Does New England cut ties with Belichick? Does Philly lose a game that they shouldn't against the Bucks? It's one of those ones that there's a big cosmic web that just when the right pieces align, that one makes sense to me. And it also comes from the standpoint of, what do we say? How old was Belichick? I think you said he was 71.
71. Yeah.
I mean, at best, maybe at best 9 years, maybe he makes it till he's 80, but I'd say that 75 is probably his tops. It not just in life. I'm just saying, like, coaching football.
Yeah, as a
Hopefully,
coach, yeah.
that's tough. It's tough. Time is ticking against you. I know that we talked about it, that he has some ties to the Commanders. Commanders are years away.
No,
They
for
need
sure.
a ton of help. I don't think he has enough time left in the tank from a football coaching perspective to take over the Commanders and that's like Vince Lombardi there at the end. He did the same thing with the Redskins, left the Packers, went there. Was he getting the program turnaround? Yeah, but he ended up dying, like, of cancer. Belichick, not that he's going to die of cancer, but it's just like, how much time he got left, man? I don't think it's enough to turn that. I think if there's a playoff team that lets loose of their coach of this playoffs, that's a spot for Belichick. Like,
Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of discussion, of Harbaugh going to the Chargers, but there's been some rumors, that Belichick could end up there as well. I think it boils down to how much organizational control are you going to allow Belichick to have. Now, does Bill swallow his pride and just be like, hey, I'm just going to be a coach. I'm just going to enjoy the last couple of years. Like, I'll say who I want, and I hope you go get them. But I honestly don't see him. I think he would need that control as well, which makes it really difficult being in one of those, playoff caliber teams who's already got a roster ready for him to come in and have that type of control to the kingdom. But man, I tell you what, probably the funniest thing that isn't going to happen for Bill Belichick, they were talking about the DC retiring out of Alabama. And everybody's like, Belichick to Alabama, the new DC is Bill Belichick. And just thinking about that for a second, gosh, dude, Alabama would win for the next decade, bringing in Belichick on the defense and just keeping Nick there, man. That'd be one heck of a way for them to ride out to the pasture together, but I don't see that ever happening.
man, I mean, I've seen that meme, but now that I'm sitting here on camera, if you were to tell me that actually happened, it would be hard to live up to the expectations of a college kid that would be
For sure.
expected of you. That's like
Oh,
the
yeah.
immediate thing I go to, because I think that people would sit back and just be like, they're going to be dangerous. Like, that's going to be a well-coached team. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who. That would be tremendous. I would argue the same thing. And it's not a Russell Wilson humbling yourself. Like, Russell Wilson needs to be humbled. Like, you're not worth the money that teams want to pay you.
For
I don't
sure.
think he's going to be a starter in the National Football League again, because if he wants the money that he is a team willing to pay him stupid money? Yes.
No. Yes.
I mean, teams have paid other players that I just couldn't believe that they did.
Deshaun.
There's always some team that's out there that's possible. I just sort of sit back and go, With Belichick, on the other hand, it's not really about humbling yourself. It's more just like, dude, I only have like a few years left. Like, if you're not going to give me the control I want, I'm just not going to put up with it. Like,
Yeah.
I've won all, I have rings for every finger. I don't need this team. I don't need to prove anything. I just don't. I'm in the same boat with you. I don't see him going to somewhere that they don't give him full control, especially after having it for as long as he did in New England. So, but thanks for making me think about Belichick and Saban being on the same team. That would be huge. But outside of that, anything else?
No, man. We'll get into all the coaches and firings, either next week or down the line once the season wraps up. So, no, nothing else.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Inaugural episode with Pops talking about the wildcard playoffs. We'll see how our predictions went. But until next time, time to pull chalks. We'll see you next time. See you later, guys.